I never imagined my 35th birthday would be the day my marriage imploded in front of everyone I loved. But there I stood in our pristine living room, watching my husband of 12 years hand a velvet jewelry box to another woman. I'm Savannah, and until that moment, I thought I had it all figured out. The perfect house in the suburbs, the successful husband, the enviable life that made my Instagram followers swoon. Funny how quickly perfection can shatter. "Trevor, honey, what's that?" I asked, my voice steady despite the champagne glass trembling in my hand. The party chatter died instantly. My husband froze, the box suspended between him and Caroline, his work colleague, who'd shown up uninvited to my birthday gathering. Her perfectly manicured fingers were already reaching for it. "It's just a small token of appreciation," Trevor stammered, his face flushing, "for all her help with the Anderson account." My sister Simone stepped closer to me, her hand finding my shoulder. "On your wife's birthday?" she asked, her tone sharp enough to cut glass. Caroline opened the box, and there it was, the vintage sapphire necklace I'd pointed out to Trevor in the antique store last month. "It's gorgeous," she breathed, already lifting it from its velvet nest. "That's quite a token," my brother Riley commented from across the room, setting his drink down with a deliberate thud. I watched Caroline's triumphant smile, Trevor's guilty fidgeting, and the horrified expressions of our gathered friends and family. The room felt like it was spinning, but something inside me snapped into crystal clear focus. "Mom," I called out, my voice surprisingly calm, "would you mind getting that envelope from my purse, the one with the red tab?" My mother Ivy hurried to comply, confusion etched on her face. The silence in the room was deafening. "Since we're exchanging gifts," I continued, accepting the envelope from my mother, "I have something for you too, Trevor." He looked relieved, probably thinking I was about to save face and smooth things over, like I always did. I'd spent years being the perfect wife, making excuses for his late nights and business trips, cleaning up his messes. Not this time. I pulled out the document and held it out to him. "It's the deed to our house. Notice anything interesting about it?" Trevor took it, his hands shaking slightly. I watched as his eyes scanned the paper, then widened in recognition. "That's right," I said, addressing our audience as much as him. "The house is in my name only, always has been. My inheritance from Grandma went into the down payment, remember?" Caroline's hand dropped from the necklace. My father Mark stepped forward, his face thunderous. "Trevor, what the hell is going on here?" "Savannah, baby, let's talk about this privately," Trevor pleaded, reaching for my arm. I stepped back. "No need. I think everything's pretty clear now. You can keep the necklace, Caroline. But you should know, he promised me that same one last month." "I can explain," Trevor started, but Simone cut him off. "Explain what? How you're giving expensive jewelry to another woman at your wife's birthday party?" Her voice dripped with disgust. "You have until tomorrow evening to pack your things," I announced, amazed at how steady my voice remained. "I've already called a lawyer." The room erupted in chaos. My mother burst into tears, my father started shouting, and Kylie, my best friend, was already on her phone, probably calling her realtor husband for advice. "You can't do this," Trevor protested weakly. "Actually, I can, and I am." I turned to address our guests. "Thank you all for coming. I'm sorry the party's ending early, but I think we've had enough excitement for one evening." As people began filing out, offering hugs and whispered support, I caught Caroline trying to slip away. "Oh, and Caroline? That Anderson account you helped with? I have copies of all the paperwork. Might want to think about that before you wear that necklace to the office." Her face went pale, and she practically ran for the door. Later that night, after everyone had gone and Trevor had retreated to the guest room, Simone sat with me on the back porch. "How long have you known?" she asked softly. I watched the ice melt in my untouched birthday cocktail. "About the affair? 3 months? About the creative accounting on his business reports? 2 weeks. Sometimes the universe hands you exactly what you need, exactly when you need it." "And the house deed?" I smiled for the first time that evening. "Let's just say Grandma taught me more than how to make her famous apple pie. She always said to hope for the best, but prepare for the worst." "What happens now?" Simone asked. I took a deep breath of the cool night air. Now I stop being the perfect wife and start being me again, whatever that means. The morning after my birthday disaster, I woke up to 37 missed calls and what felt like the entire neighborhood watching our house. Trevor had already left, taking only a small suitcase and his guilty conscience with him. "You've started a war," Riley declared, barging into my kitchen without knocking. He was still wearing his running gear, sweat beading on his forehead. "Dad's furious." "Good morning to you, too," I muttered, clutching my coffee mug like a lifeline. "And since when does Dad take Trevor's side?" "Since Mom spent all night crying about how this will affect her garden club reputation." Riley grabbed an apple from my fruit bowl. "You know how he gets when Mom's upset." The doorbell rang before I could respond. Simone walked in, carrying breakfast pastries and her signature "we need to talk" expression. "I brought reinforcements," she announced, setting the box on my counter. "Also, you might want to check Facebook. Caroline's posted something interesting." I pulled out my phone, but Riley snatched it away. "Don't, it's not worth it." "Give it back," I demanded, reaching across the counter. "He's right," Simone interjected. "She's playing victim, claiming workplace harassment or something. It's ridiculous." The doorbell rang again. This time it was Kylie, her face flushed with anger. "You will not believe who I just ran into at Starbucks," she fumed, dropping her purse on my counter. "Trevor and Caroline looking very cozy. He's wearing the same clothes from last night." My stomach lurched. Simone immediately moved closer, her hand finding mine. "I took pictures," Kylie continued, pulling out her phone. "Just in case you need them for—" "Don't," Riley interrupted. "Savannah, you need to think carefully about your next move. The revenge thing? It felt good last night, I get it, but what?" I snapped. "I should just forgive and forget? Let him humiliate me in front of everyone and walk away?" "That's not what he's saying," Simone said softly. "But Riley's right about being careful. Trevor's already trying to spin this. I heard he told Dad you've been emotionally unavailable for months." I laughed bitterly. Emotionally unavailable? I was planning his surprise birthday party while he was buying jewelry for his girlfriend. The doorbell rang a third time. This time it was my parents. "Savannah Marie," my father boomed as he walked in. "What have you done?" "What have I done?" I stood up straighter. "Why don't you ask your precious son-in-law what he's done?" "Mark," my mother pleaded, "please don't." "No, Ivy, this needs to be addressed. Trevor called this morning. He's devastated. Says you ambushed him, humiliated him." "Oh my God," Kylie interrupted, shoving her phone in my father's face. "Is this what a devastated man looks like?" My father's face reddened as he looked at the photos of Trevor and Caroline. My mother gasped. "They're not even trying to hide it," Simone commented. "Classy." "That's—" My father stumbled over his words. "That's not—" "That's exactly what it looks like," I said quietly. "And that's not even the worst part. Want to know what I found in his office files?" Riley stepped forward. "Savannah, maybe we should—" "No, they should know. Everyone should know what their perfect son-in-law has been up to. Those business trips, the late nights. He's been cooking the books with Caroline's help. I have proof." The kitchen fell silent. My mother sank into a chair, her face pale. "How long?" my father asked, his voice different now, quieter. "Long enough to make me glad I kept the house in my name." I pulled out a folder from the kitchen drawer. "Here's everything I found. Bank statements, fake invoices, emails between them going back months." My father took the folder with trembling hands. As a retired accountant, he would understand exactly what he was looking at. "I'll kill him," he muttered after a few minutes of reading. "No, you won't," my mother said firmly, standing up. "Savannah, honey, I'm so sorry. We should have—" "It's okay, Mom," I said, feeling tears prick at my eyes for the first time since last night. "You couldn't have known." "What's your plan?" Riley asked, his earlier skepticism replaced with concern. "First, I meet with my lawyer this afternoon. Then—" I took a deep breath. "Then I start figuring out who I am without him." "You're my sister," Simone said fiercely. "That's who you are, and we've got your back." "All of us," my father added, closing the folder. "I'll make some calls. I know people who can help with the financial investigation." As my family rallied around me, I felt something shift inside. The hurt was still there, but underneath it was something stronger, something like hope. "One day at a time," Kylie said, pulling me into a hug. "And maybe change the locks?" For the first time in what felt like forever, I laughed. Really laughed. 3 days after changing the locks, I found myself sitting in a dimly lit coffee shop across from Harley, Trevor's former business partner. He'd reached out through LinkedIn, of all places, with a message that simply read, We should talk. I always knew Trevor would implode eventually, Harley said, stirring his black coffee. That's why I got out when I did. But I never expected it to be so public. Neither did I admitted, watching his face carefully. Why did you really want to meet Harley? He glanced around before pulling out a USB drive. Because I've been waiting for someone to finally see Trevor for who he really is. And because I have something you need to see. My phone buzzed. Another message from Trevor. I'd been ignoring them all week, each one alternating between desperate pleas and thinly veiled threats. Let me guess, Harley said, nodding at my phone. He's either saying he'll change or threatening to ruin you. Both, actually, sometimes in the same message. Classic Trevor. Harley pushed the USB drive across the table. This contains every transaction record from when we were partners, including the ones he tried to delete. Before I could respond, a familiar voice cut through the cafe. Well, isn't this cozy? Caroline stood at our table, designer handbag clutched like a shield. She looked different, harder somehow, than she had at my birthday party. Please, join us, I said, gesturing to an empty chair. I'm sure you have plenty to add to the conversation. You think you're so clever, she hissed, but sat down anyway. Do you have any idea what you've done? The board is asking questions. Clients are nervous. Sounds like a you problem, Harley commented dryly. Caroline's head snapped toward him. You're supposed to be gone. Trevor said you signed an NDA. I did, Harley smiled, about the company's legitimate business practices, but fraud wasn't covered in that agreement. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Simone. Dad's looking at those files. Says it's worse than we thought. Call me ASAP. You know what's interesting, Caroline? I leaned forward. I've been doing some digging. Those Anderson account numbers you helped Trevor with? They don't add up, and your signature is on every document. Her face paled slightly. You don't know what you're talking about. Actually, she does, Harley interjected. I kept copies of everything, including the original numbers, before you two started playing creative accountants. Caroline's composure cracked. He promised me it was safe, that no one would ever know. Trevor promises a lot of things, I said quietly, like fidelity, honesty, that sapphire necklace. You don't understand, she whispered, suddenly looking very young. I needed this job. He said if I helped him, he'd take care of you, Harley finished, like he took care of his last assistant, or the intern before that. I felt the floor shift beneath me. What? Oh, you didn't know? Caroline laughed bitterly. I'm not special. I'm just the latest in a long line of Trevor's projects. He finds young women who need something, a job, a promotion, financial help, and offers to be their savior. While skimming money from client accounts, Harley added. It's his pattern. My phone buzzed again. Riley this time. Just talk to Dad. You need to see these numbers. Trevor's been busy. How much? I asked Caroline. How much did he take? She looked at her hands. Enough to send us both to jail. Not both of you, Harley corrected. All three of you. I'm assuming you've seen the offshore account statements? Caroline's head snapped up. What offshore accounts? Harley pulled out his laptop. The ones Trevor opened in your name, and Savannah's, and mine, though he never got access to that one. Want to see? As Harley turned the screen toward us, Caroline's face went from pale to ashen. That's not... I never... Let me guess, I said, feeling oddly calm. He had you sign some papers a few months ago? Said they were routine documentation? She nodded slowly. Welcome to Trevor's world, Harley said grimly, where everyone's a potential fall guy. My phone buzzed one final time. Trevor. We need to talk. Now, you don't know what you're doing. I looked at Caroline, saw the same fear in her eyes that I'd felt for months. Then at Harley, who'd escaped Trevor's web years ago and lived to tell about it. Actually, I said, picking up my phone, I know exactly what I'm doing. I turned to Caroline. Want to help me do it? She stared at me for a long moment, then reached for her purse and pulled out a thick folder. Everything I have is in here. Bank statements, emails, recorded conversations. I started keeping records after I found out about the others. Smart girl? Harley nodded approvingly. As I took the folder, my hand steady despite everything, I realized this wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about justice. The conference room at my lawyer's office felt too small for the weight of what we were about to do. Caroline sat beside me, nervously twisting her ring, the one Trevor had given her last Christmas. I realized with a bitter taste in my mouth. These records are extensive, Sarah, my lawyer, said as she spread the documents across the mahogany table. The offshore accounts alone will be enough to bury him, Harley finished, pointing to a specific transaction. Look at this one. He used Savannah's social security number without her knowledge. The door opened, and my father walked in with Riley. Both looked grim. The forensic accountant finished his preliminary review, my father announced, dropping another stack of papers on the table. It's worse than we thought. Trevor wasn't just stealing from clients, he was laundering money. For who? Sarah asked, reaching for the new documents. Before anyone could answer, my phone lit up with Trevor's face. I'd forgotten I never changed his contact photo. Us laughing on our last vacation before everything fell apart. Answer it, Harley suggested. On speaker. Let's hear what he has to say. I pressed the green button. Hello, Trevor. Baby, please, his voice crackled through the speaker. Whatever you think you're doing, stop. You don't understand the people involved. Oh, I understand plenty, I replied, watching Caroline's face grow paler. Like how you've been using my identity to open accounts, or how you've been grooming young employees for years. Silence on the other end. Then, who have you been talking to? Everyone, I said simply. Caroline's sitting right here, actually. Want to explain to her about the accounts in her name? Caroline. His voice turned sharp. What have you done? What I should have done months ago, she replied, her voice shaking but determined. I showed Savannah everything, Trevor. The recordings, the emails, the threats. You stupid bit. Careful, Riley cut in. You're on speaker and there are witnesses. Another silence. Who else is there? Your worst nightmare, Harley answered cheerfully. Hello, old friend? Harley, Trevor's voice cracked. This is impossible. You signed an NDA about legitimate business practices, Harley finished. But we both know that's not what we're dealing with here, don't we? The sound of something shattering came through the phone. You have no idea what you're getting into, Trevor hissed. These people, These people? Sarah interrupted, her pen poised over her legal pad. Would you care to elaborate on that, Mr. Baker? Who is this? Savannah, are you with a lawyer? I'm with several people who are very interested in your business practices, I replied, including Dad. Mark? Trevor's voice turned pleading. You have to understand. I was trying to build something, for the family, for Savannah. My father's face darkened. The only thing you built was a house of cards, and it's about to come down. Listen to me. Trevor's voice turned urgent. There's a safe in my office behind the Rothko print, the contents. They'll explain everything, but you can't turn those files over to anyone. People will get hurt. Caroline suddenly stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. The missing insurance payments, she whispered. The construction company that went bankrupt overnight. That wasn't just fraud, was it? Caroline, shut up, Trevor snapped. No, she shot back. Tell them what really happened to Michael from accounting when he threatened to go to the board. The room went deadly quiet. What happened to Michael? Sarah asked, her pen now racing across the paper. He had an accident, Caroline said quietly. Car brake failure. Trevor said it was tragic timing. You can't prove anything. Trevor's voice had turned cold. And if you try, you might find yourself having similar bad luck. Is that a threat? Sarah asked sharply. That's enough, I cut in, my heart pounding but my voice steady. Trevor, I'm going to hang up now. The next time you hear from me, it'll be through my lawyer. Savannah, wait. I ended the call. The room remained silent for several long moments. Well, Harley finally said, that was illuminating. We need to call the FBI, my father declared. This goes beyond financial fraud. Sarah was already dialing. I have a contact in the white-collar crimes division, given what we just heard. They'll want to talk to all of us, Caroline said, her voice small. I'll tell them everything. Riley moved to the window, peering through the blinds at the street below. We should be careful leaving here. If what he said about Michael is true, I'll call in some favors, Harley offered. Get some security in place. I looked at the scattered papers on the table, each one a piece of the puzzle I'd been too blind to see while living in it. I wanted revenge, I said quietly. I didn't expect to uncover a crime syndicate. Sometimes the truth is stranger than fiction. my father said, squeezing my shoulder. But you're not alone in this. No, I agreed, watching Sarah speak rapidly into her phone. I'm not alone anymore. The FBI office was nothing like the movies. No dramatic interrogation rooms or wall-sized screens, just fluorescent lights and generic office furniture. Agent Lisa Martinez sat across from me, her dark eyes scanning the documents spread between us. Mrs. Baker. Just Savannah, I corrected. I'm not keeping his name. She nodded. Savannah. What you and Ms. Webb have brought us. This is significant, but we need you to understand the risks. You mean besides the fact that my husband apparently has connections to organized crime? We believe Trevor was a mid-level player. Another agent, Tom, interjected from his position by the window, moving money for some very dangerous people. The door opened, and Caroline was escorted in by a third agent. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Tell them what you told me, she said without preamble, about the safe. I straightened in my chair. Trevor mentioned a safe behind a painting in his office, said the contents would explain everything. We found it, Agent Martinez said. The contents were enlightening, but we also found this. She slid a photograph across the table. My hands shook as I picked it up. It was a picture of me, taken yesterday, getting coffee with Simone. We hadn't noticed anyone following us. He's having me watched? Not Trevor, Tom said grimly. His associates. They know you're talking to us. Caroline sank into a chair. This is my fault. If I hadn't helped him... Stop. I cut her off. You were manipulated just like I was. The only difference is you figured it out sooner. Agent Martinez leaned forward. We need to move you both to a safe location, today. What about my family? I asked. My sister, my parents? Already being contacted, Tom assured me. Your brother Riley is with federal marshals now. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. The painting wasn't the only thing hiding secrets. Check the garden shed. That's not from Trevor, I said, showing Agent Martinez. He doesn't know about... I stopped, remembering something. The garden. Last spring, Trevor insisted on rebuilding the shed himself. Wouldn't let anyone help. Caroline's head snapped up. He did the same thing at the lake house. Said he needed a project. Agent Martinez was already on her phone. We need a team at both locations, now. What aren't you telling us? I demanded. The agents exchanged looks before Tom spoke. We believe Trevor was keeping physical evidence, insurance in case his partners turned on him. Like recordings? Caroline asked. Because he always had this little device in his pocket. Said it was a backup phone. A recorder, Agent Martinez confirmed. We found several in his office safe, along with some very interesting conversations. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Simone. FBI just picked me up. What the hell is going on? Before I could respond, the office door burst open. A senior agent rushed in, face tense. We found something in the shed. Multiple hard drives, offshore account numbers, and... He paused, looking at me apologetically. And what? I pressed. A gun, he finished, with filed-off serial numbers. Caroline made a small choking sound. The Michael situation, she whispered. Agent Martinez stood up. That's it. You're both going into protective custody right now. No arguments. Wait, I said, pulling out my own phone. Let me show you something first. I pulled up a video file. Trevor didn't know I had cameras installed in the garden. After I found the first suspicious bank statement, I got paranoid. The agents huddled around my phone, watching as the footage showed Trevor making late-night trips to the shed, carrying packages and folders. This is from the night before my birthday party, I explained, fast-forwarding. The last time I saw him go in there. This is excellent, Agent Martinez said. But it also means you're in more danger than we thought. If he realizes you have this footage... My phone lit up with Trevor's number. Answer it, Tom instructed, already setting up recording equipment. Keep him talking. I took a deep breath and pressed accept. Hello? The garden shed, Savannah? Trevor's voice was eerily calm. You always were too clever for your own good. I learned from the best, I replied, watching the agents trace the call. You taught me to always have a backup plan. Did I teach you what happens to people who betray me? No, I said, feeling a strange sense of calm. But you taught me what happens to people who trust you. I think I prefer being your enemy. Silence, then. You have no idea what you've done. Actually, I smiled, looking at the agents surrounding me. I know exactly what I've done. The question is, do you? The line went dead. Agent Martinez immediately sprang into action, barking orders into her radio. He's running, Tom announced, looking at his phone. Just cleared his bank accounts. Let him run, I said, standing up. The evidence isn't going anywhere, and neither am I. Caroline looked at me with something like admiration. You planned this all along, didn't you? The cameras, the records. Let's just say I learned to sleep with one eye open, I replied. Now, about that protective custody. The safe house was actually a modest apartment in a city 3 hours from home. 2 weeks had passed since Trevor's disappearance, and my family was scattered across different locations under federal protection. The only familiar face was Simone, who'd been placed with me after Dad's heart scare. Dad's out of the hospital, Simone announced, hanging up her burner phone. Mom says his blood pressure is stabilizing. I stared out the window at the unfamiliar skyline. This is my fault. If I hadn't pushed so hard. Don't, Simone cut me off. Dad's condition is stress-related, yes, but the stress came from learning his son-in-law is a criminal, not from you exposing him. A knock at the door made us both freeze. Agent Martinez's voice came through. Daily check-in. After the proper verification procedures, she entered with Caroline in tow. I hadn't seen her since we'd been separated into different safe houses. They found Trevor's laptop, Caroline said without preamble, in a storage unit registered to my name, one I didn't know existed. Agent Martinez set a file on the coffee table. The contents are concerning. He had detailed information on all of you. Family routines, financial records, potential pressure points. He was preparing to run, I realized, building leverage against everyone who might talk. Yes, Martinez confirmed, but he made a mistake. The laptop also contained evidence of every transaction he ever made for his employers. Simone leaned forward. So you can arrest him? We could, Martinez said carefully, if we could find him. My phone, the new secure one, buzzed with a message from Riley. Turn on the news, now. I grabbed the remote, and there it was. Trevor's face plastered across the screen alongside the word missing. Local businessman Trevor Baker's vehicle was found abandoned near the Canadian border, the reporter announced. Police are treating his disappearance as suspicious after signs of struggle were found at the scene. It's staged, Caroline said immediately. It has to be. We think so too, Martinez agreed, but his associates might not see it that way. What do you mean? Simone asked. They might think he's cooperating with us, and if they think that, they'll want to silence him, I finished, and anyone connected to him. Another knock, this one urgent. Agent Tom burst in. We need to move, now. Someone access the safe house registry. How? Martinez demanded, already pulling out her phone. Internal leak. Pack your essentials, 5 minutes max. As we scrambled to gather our things, my secure phone buzzed again. An unknown number. Don't answer it, Martinez warned. Wait, Caroline said, looking over my shoulder. That's not Trevor's pattern. He uses burner phones, but always with area codes from... It's Harley, I realized. This is how he contacted me before? Martinez nodded, starting a trace. Answer on speaker. Harley? They're coming. His voice was rushed, traffic sounds in the background. Trevor's partners. They think he flipped. They're cleaning house. We know, I said. We're moving now. No, you don't understand. The leak isn't just the safe house registry, it's everything. Client lists, witness locations, federal protocols. Martinez was already barking orders into her radio. Where are you? I asked Harley. Following a lead. Trevor's not running, Savannah. He's hunting. He's going to give them everyone involved to save himself. Including you? Including all of us. Listen, there's a file on his laptop. Password protected, labeled insurance. Get into it. How? Your anniversary date, he said. He always used it. Said no one would suspect something so obvious. The line went dead. We got a location, Tom announced. He's heading north. So is Trevor, Caroline added, looking at her phone. My friend at the bank just texted. He tried to access his secondary account from Montreal. Martinez made a quick decision. Change of plans. We're splitting up. Different locations, different routes. No, I said firmly. That's what they want, to isolate us, pick us off one by one. She's right, Simone agreed. We're stronger together. And we have something they don't know about, Caroline added. The insurance file. I pulled out my laptop, hands shaking slightly as I entered my anniversary date. The file opened, revealing hundreds of documents, photos, and videos. Oh my God, Caroline breathed, looking at the screen. He recorded everything. Every meeting, every threat, every deal. This isn't just insurance, Martinez said, scanning the files. This is a confession. And a death sentence if they find him, Tom added grimly. I looked at the faces around me. My sister, the woman my husband betrayed me with, the agents protecting us, all bound together by Trevor's web of lies. So we find him first, I said, before they do. Martinez nodded slowly. We'll need a plan. I have one, I replied, thinking of the garden shed cameras, the hidden recordings, all the times I'd been underestimated. And they'll never see it coming. The Montreal hotel lobby was exactly as Trevor described in his emails to Caroline, all gleaming marble and discreet luxury. I sat at the bar, wearing the sapphire necklace he'd given Caroline, knowing it would draw his attention. Target spotted. Agent Martinez's voice crackled through my hidden earpiece. Northwest entrance. I didn't turn around. Instead, I watched Trevor's reflection in the mirrored bar wall as he walked in, his confident stride faltering when he saw me. Of all the gin joints, I said as he slid onto the bar stool next to me. How's life as a fugitive? Savannah, he breathed, eyes fixed on the necklace. How did you get Caroline's necklace? I smiled, taking a sip of my martini. She gave it to me, along with everything else. His hand twitched toward his pocket, where he usually kept his recorder. You shouldn't be here. Actually, I'm exactly where I should be. The question is, why are you? You don't understand what's happening, he said, ordering a scotch with a shaking hand. Don't I? The insurance file was very educational. He froze, glass halfway to his lips. You got into the file? Our anniversary date? Really, Trevor? For someone so calculating, you can be incredibly sentimental. Target 2 entering through East Door, Martinez warned in my ear. I watched in the mirror as a large man in an expensive suit walked in, scanning the room. Trevor's reflection went pale. We need to go, he said urgently, grabbing my arm. Now. Let go of me, I said loudly enough for nearby patrons to turn. Trevor immediately released me, forcing a smile. Please, he whispered. These people, they'll kill us both. Like Michael from accounting? I asked. Or should I say, like you killed Michael from accounting? I never... He stopped as another suited man entered from the south entrance. Savannah, please, I can explain everything. Target 3 in position, Martinez confirmed. We're ready. I reached for my purse, pulling out a USB drive. You mean explain this? Every transaction, every meeting, every murder, it's all here. Plus a few recordings of my own. What recordings? Remember last month when you met those men in our garden shed? Did you really think I wouldn't notice the late-night visits, the mysterious packages? His face contorted. You were spying on me? I learned from the best, I replied, standing up. Oh, and those offshore accounts in my name? I transferred everything back, every penny. The FBI is tracking it all now. You stupid... He grabbed for the USB drive, but I stepped back. Federal agents! Martinez's voice boomed through the lobby. Everyone down. The chaos was immediate. Hotel guests screamed and dropped to the floor as agents swarmed in from every entrance. The suited men reached for weapons but were quickly surrounded. Trevor tried to run, but Riley, who'd been posing as a bellhop, tackled him from behind. That's for Dad's heart attack, my brother growled, pinning Trevor's arms. Agent Martinez approached with handcuffs. Trevor Baker, you're under arrest for fraud, money laundering, conspiracy to commit murder. You can't prove anything, Trevor spat. Actually, Caroline said, emerging from her position at a nearby table. We can prove everything. Those recordings you kept? I made copies. All those meetings where you thought I was just your loyal assistant, I was building a case. You set me up, he said, looking between us. All of you. No, Trevor, I corrected him. You set yourself up. We just made sure you couldn't run from it. As the agents led him away, he turned back to me. I did it all for us, for our future. Our future died the moment you decided to betray everything we built, I replied. But hey, look on the bright side. Orange might be your color. The lobby slowly cleared. guests being interviewed by agents, the suited men taken away in separate vehicles. Simone appeared from her surveillance position at the hotel restaurant. "Dad's watching the live feed from the safe house," she told me. "Says his blood pressure's never been better." Agent Martinez approached, looking satisfied. "We got them all. The entire network. Your evidence and testimony will put them away for decades." "And Trevor?" Caroline asked. "His partners aren't happy he kept records," Martinez said. "He'll be safer in federal custody than anywhere else." I reached up and unclasped the sapphire necklace, holding it out to Caroline. "I believe this belongs to you." She shook her head. "Keep it. Consider it payment for opening my eyes." "Speaking of payment," Riley interjected, "the FBI found Trevor's real estate holdings. Turns out my sister owns a lake house she didn't know about." I laughed. A real, free laugh. "Anyone up for a vacation when this is all over?" "First," Martinez said, "we need your official statements, all of you." I looked at my unlikely team, my siblings, my husband's mistress turned ally, the agents who'd protected us, and felt something settle in my chest. "Let's finish this," I said. "I've got a life to rebuild." The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters as I walked out into the bright afternoon sun. The verdict had taken less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. "Miss Baker," a reporter called out, "how does it feel knowing your testimony helped bring down one of the largest money laundering operations in the state?" Before I could answer, Simone stepped in front of me. "It's Miss Clark now. She's taken back her maiden name." My phone buzzed. A message from Caroline. "Just landed in Seattle. New job starts Monday. Thank you for everything." "Savannah." My father called from the courthouse entrance, where he stood with my mother and Riley. "The U.S. attorney wants to speak with you." As I turned to go back inside, a familiar voice cut through the crowd. "Savannah, wait." Trevor's mother pushed through the reporters, her face tear-stained. "Please, he's still your husband. You can ask for leniency." "Margaret," my mother interrupted, stepping forward. "Your son orchestrated fraud, laundered money for criminals, and was involved in a murder. The time for leniency is long past." "He made mistakes." "Mistakes?" Riley scoffed. "He tried to frame his own wife for his crimes. He put our entire family in danger." "I trusted him," I said quietly, making Margaret fall silent. "We all did. That was our mistake." Inside the courthouse, Agent Martinez waited with the U.S. attorney and Harley, who'd just finished his own testimony. "The task force wants to thank you," the U.S. attorney said. "Your evidence didn't just stop Trevor. It helped us uncover corruption in 3 state governments." "I didn't do it alone," I replied, glancing at Harley. "A lot of people risked everything to expose the truth." "Speaking of truth," Martinez added, "Trevor's partners are all pleading guilty. No one's coming after you or your family anymore." My father pulled out an envelope. "Which means we can finally do this." He handed it to me. "The deed to the lake house, transferred fully into your name. No traces of Trevor left." "And this," Harley said, offering another envelope. "My company's buying out Trevor's share of our old business. You're entitled to half, as his wife, or soon-to-be ex-wife." I opened it, saw the number, and nearly dropped the envelope. "This is too much." "It's exactly what you deserve," Simone insisted, "for everything you've been through. Besides," Riley added with a grin, "someone needs to maintain that lake house." My mother touched my arm. "Have you decided what you're going to do with it?" I nodded. "I'm turning it into a retreat center for women leaving difficult situations. Kylie's already agreed to help run it." "Perfect use for a fresh start," Martinez smiled. "Speaking of which," she pulled out a business card. "The FBI's Forensic Accounting Division is always looking for people with your attention to detail. Are you offering me a job? Consider it a thank you for helping us close our biggest case this year." The courthouse doors opened again, and I watched as officers led Trevor toward the prisoner transport vehicle. He looked smaller somehow, his expensive suit replaced with prison orange. "Any last words for him?" Riley asked. I shook my head. "I've said everything I needed to say in my testimony. The rest is just noise." "That's my girl," my father said proudly. My phone buzzed again, a message from Kylie. "First retreat center guest arrived. She reminds me of you 6 months ago. Scared but strong." Looking around at my support system, family, friends, even former enemies turned allies, I felt the last weight lift from my shoulders. "You know what this calls for?" Simone announced. "A celebration, not of Trevor's conviction, but of you, of survival, of starting over." "Count me in," Harley said. "First round's on me." "Before we go," Martinez interjected, "one last thing." She handed me a final envelope. "The sapphire necklace sold at auction. As seized property, the proceeds go to victim restitution. In this case, that's you." "I don't want anything connected to him," I started to protest. "Take it," my mother advised. "Use it for the retreat center. Turn his attempt to buy silence into something that helps people speak up." I opened the envelope and smiled. "First thing we're installing is a top-notch security system." "That's assuming Riley doesn't volunteer to be your full-time security guard," Simone teased. "Hey, someone has to keep an eye on my little sister," Riley protested. "Even if she did prove she can take care of herself." As we walked out into the sunshine together, I realized something. My birthday wish had come true, just not in the way I'd expected. I'd wished for clarity, for truth, for strength. I got all three, and a whole new life in the bargain. "So," Simone linked her arm through mine. "Ready for your next chapter?" I looked back at the courthouse one last time, then forward at the path ahead. "More than ready," I said. "Let's go write it."
Thank you, Mom. We'll be all right. In the pre-dawn hours of Minnesota, a soft light spilled from the windows of a two-story house nestled in a residential neighborhood. In the kitchen, Carol Blake was busy preparing breakfast. Her shoulder-length brown hair tied back neatly, the way she adjusted her apron reflected her characteristically meticulous nature. "Katie, time to wake up." Her gentle green eyes checked the clock. 6 a.m. The start of her unchanging daily routine. As the manager of Sunshine Care Daycare Center, Carol's day started early. But even more important was her morning time with 8-year-old Katie. Making her daughter's lunch with love was like a ritual she never skimped on since losing her own mother 19 years ago. "Good morning, Mama." Katie, coming down the stairs, was a striking young girl with her mother's green eyes and golden twin tails. A third grader at Greenwood Elementary School, she was an excellent student highly trusted by her teacher, Mrs. Johnson. However, she'd had asthma since she was little, which was Carol's constant concern. "The weather forecast says it'll be windy today. Don't forget your asthma medication." Katie nodded with familiar ease at her mother's worried tone. Her mother's excessive worry was just part of her daily life. Carol never failed in her daily habit of checking the house's security. Verifying the security cameras were working, checking windows that served as emergency exits, confirming the escape ladder's condition. The traumatic memory of losing her mother Ellen to fire 20 years ago compelled her to do so. It happened in Columbus, Ohio, in 2004. Her stepfather's arson for insurance money. Her mother, asleep at the time, couldn't escape and lost her life. That experience drastically changed Carol's life. She was cautious about marriage too, until she met Mark at a charity event 8 years ago. Mark Blake, a site supervisor at Connect Construction. She was drawn to his short black hair, sturdy build, and sincere personality, deciding to marry after 2 years of dating. But lately, he seemed different. A new expensive watch, increasing over time, never letting go of his phone. Family conversations decreased. Fatigue showed in his expression. Working late again. When Carol asked, Mark just nodded vaguely. Their house was particularly well equipped with security and fire prevention systems, even in this quiet residential area. Carol had insisted on such equipment when they bought it 2 years ago. The mortgage was $300,000. With their combined household income of $120,000 from Mark's salary and Carol's daycare center earnings, the payments weren't easy. But there was a hidden problem no one knew about. Mark's secret $400,000 gambling debt. The weight of that casino-induced debt was increasingly cornering him. "I'm heading out." Seeing Katie off with those words, Carol headed to work too. The elderly were waiting for her at the daycare center. She had earned the staff's trust with her calm handling of emergencies and warm personality. Daily life appeared peaceful. However, beneath the surface, a storm that would greatly shake their lives was quietly approaching. At the daycare center one afternoon, Carol gazed at the family photo on her desk between paperwork. It was taken right after moving into their new home 2 years ago. Mark and Katie smiling, with her mother-in-law Helen standing beside them as if giving her blessing. Back then, she never imagined things would turn out like this. She remembered the day she first met Helen. Right after deciding to marry. A woman with an intellectual air befitting her background as a former high school teacher, elegantly dressed. Yet there was something calculating and cold in her eyes. That unsettling feeling she still couldn't forget. Still, out of love for Mark, Carol had suppressed that discomfort. A nurse colleague's voice brought her back to reality. Always calm and precise at work. That was an attitude she had consciously cultivated since that night 20 years ago. Returning home, she found an unfamiliar receipt on the living room table. From a luxury watch store. An amount that should have been beyond Mark's salary. Such disconcerting things had been piling up over the past few months. "Mama, welcome home." Katie's voice coming down from the second floor. Her daughter's presence always warmed her heart. Having lost her own mother, she was determined never to let Katie experience the same. That's why she was absolutely thorough about home safety. Escape ladders for every window. Multiple fire alarms. And an emergency bag positioned for quick access. "Katie, shall we do our evacuation drill today?" Yes. The weekly evacuation drill had become routine. Katie always took it seriously, as if understanding her mother's earnestness. Even though it was just practice, Carol's heart always tightened. Because the scene of her mother's death felt as vivid as if it happened yesterday. She never skipped her bedtime checks either. Confirming all windows were locked, security cameras working, fire hazards checked. The safe containing the life insurance policy was in its usual place. Insurance amount, $1 million. A precaution for the worst case. Ironically, it was the same thing that had driven her mother to her death. "Good night, Katie." Before leaving her daughter's room, Carol always looked back one more time. What she learned from her mother's death: never neglect being cautious to protect loved ones. That was her way of life. In the darkness, gazing out the window, Carol wondered. How long would these peaceful days continue? As if sensing the coming storm. The season was approaching early summer, and the days were getting longer. Still, by the time Carol returned home, the sun was already setting. Looking at the empty parking lot, she let out a small sigh. Mark's car wasn't back yet. This had become the new normal lately. His overtime, previously 3 times a week, was now daily. Weekend work increased, and his return time gradually shifted from 7 p.m. to midnight. Family conversations decreased, and he wouldn't let go of his smartphone even during meals. "Dad's scent is different," Katie had murmured one day. Carol had noticed too. The unfamiliar perfume lingering on Mark's collar. A luxury brand fragrance that should have been beyond his salary. Credit card statements showed charges from unfamiliar restaurants and high-end boutiques. Anxiety grew in Carol's chest. But even more concerning was the presence of her mother-in-law, Helen Blake, who had moved to the neighborhood 6 months ago. The 67-year-old former high school teacher, with her short white hair and ever-present expensive pearl necklace. Despite her superficial friendliness, her eyes held a calculating light. Her sudden frequent visits, excessive interference in household matters, and most notably, her knack for interrupting conversations between the couple at perfect moments. "Dear, leave it to me," Helen would say, standing in the kitchen. Carol felt uneasy watching her back. Her overprotective attitude toward her son seemed to suggest something beyond mere maternal affection. Then one afternoon, a call from the company's accounting department first brought the name Jessica Morrison to Carol's ears. 29 years old. A young female employee with a black bob cut, perfect makeup, wrapped in luxury brands. Around that time, Katie's behavior began to change too. She spent more time in her upstairs room, avoiding conversations with her father. Most worryingly, her asthma symptoms began worsening again. "Katie, what's wrong?" Even when asked, her daughter would just show an expression of wanting to say something, but ultimately remain silent. Later, it would become clear that she had been listening to her father's phone conversations through the ventilation duct in her room. And, worried about what she heard, she had begun recording them on her smartphone. Conversations with his mistress, discussions about money troubles, and talk about insurance. All of it recorded on Katie's small shoulders, weighted down with great anxiety. And that anxiety proved justified. One deep night, Carol was listening to her husband and mother-in-law's voices leaking from the study. The clock showed 1:30 a.m. "If we make it look like a fire, it's perfect. The insurance will definitely pay out." Her mother-in-law's cold voice cut through the darkness. "But is this really our only option?" Her husband's voice contained hesitation. "Once those two are gone, everything will work out." Those words sent a chill down Carol's spine. However, years of habit supported her. Carefully returning to her room without betraying her agitation. Final confirmation of escape routes. Contents of the emergency bag. And most importantly, checking Katie's room. Outside the window, the early summer night wind rustled through the trees. The sound seemed to echo like a prelude to an approaching tragedy. As night deepened, Carol's anxiety deepened too. After hearing the conversation from the study, she spent a sleepless night. Lying in bed, the nightmare from 20 years ago returned. Had her mother noticed then too? Did she have any premonition on that last night? While preparing breakfast, Carol observed her surroundings more carefully than usual. Mark had already left for work, leaving words about early morning site inspection. Katie's footsteps coming down the stairs brought her back to herself. "Good morning, Mama." The usual bright voice. However, her eyes held a shadow as if carrying something heavy. "Katie, is something worrying you?" she asked casually. But her daughter just shook her head. In her hand was the smartphone she had somehow begun carrying constantly. After breakfast, as Carol was clearing the dishes, the doorbell rang. "Good morning, Carol." Helen stood there, her pearl necklace reflecting the morning light. Another surprise visit from her mother-in-law, not uncommon lately. "I made Mark's lunch." Helen entering the kitchen. Her gestures revealed intentions to seize control of the household. "Helen, we can handle our own household chores." Carol responded calmly but firmly. For a moment, hostility flashed in Helen's eyes, but quickly returned to her usual friendly smile. That afternoon, while Carol was doing paperwork at the daycare center, she received a call from Mark's company. "This is Jessica from accounting." A refined voice. Even over the phone, her presence was striking. "Are you Mark's wife?" The conversation content was trivial, confirming Mark's overtime application. However, there seemed to be something intentional in that voice, as if deliberately making her presence known. At dusk, returning home, Carol was greeted by Helen relaxing in the living room. "I was helping with Katie's homework." As if it were natural. However, there was no trace of homework on the table. At night, after putting Katie to bed, Carol rechecked all the house's locks. Then checked the emergency bag contents once more. Flashlight, first aid supplies, and most importantly, important documents. Everything was in order. Looking up at the window, the moon was hidden by clouds. And in that darkness, Carol strengthened her resolve. The past when she couldn't save her mother. But this time would be different. She would definitely protect her daughter's life, and her own. Between anxiety about tomorrow and strong determination, Carol spent a long night. At 5 a.m., the moment an unusual sound echoed from the kitchen, Carol woke up. A faint burning smell tensed her entire body. The memory from 20 years ago crashed over her in an instant. By the time she stood up, black smoke was already rising from the first floor. The fire alarm began its sharp sound. In that moment, years of training began moving her body. First to Katie's room. The emergency bag was already prepared near the door. "Katie, wake up." She gently but firmly shook her daughter's shoulder. Without giving time for confusion, she pressed a prepared wet towel to her daughter's mouth. "Mama. It's okay. We'll do just like we practiced." Desperately suppressing her trembling voice, Carol guided her daughter. Smoke had already begun filling the hallway. Setting up the escape ladder was a motion practiced countless times. Opening the window, confirming the fixings. The dark outside air flowed into the smoke-filled room. "Take it slow. Mama's supporting you." When Katie tried to exit through the window, Carol could tell an asthma attack was beginning. But having anticipated this, she quickly pulled out an inhaler. When the two reached the ground, lights in the neighborhood were turning on one after another. Someone's voice calling the fire department. Neighbors rushing out in pajamas. And there stood Mark and mother-in-law Helen. In proper clothes. As if they had been waiting. Their first expressions were clear shock and panic. Surprise at witnessing survivors outside their plan. But quickly, that changed to different expressions. "Carol. Thank goodness you're safe." There was something theatrical in her mother-in-law's voice. "It's okay, when the insurance pays out." Mark's words unnaturally trailed off. "You can come to my house," Helen quickly continued. In her eyes, light seemed to dance as if already planning the next step. With a roar, the fire truck arrived. The siren's light dyed the pre-dawn street red. Police vehicles also began gathering, starting preparations for scene investigation. Neighbors gathered with blankets and drinks. Among that circle of goodwill, Carol quietly strengthened her resolve. She would absolutely not go to her mother-in-law's house. However, that resolve couldn't hold long. In this situation, staying at your mother's house would be best, a police officer advised persuasively. Indeed, that judgment made sense. A mother-in-law extending help to a mother and child who lost everything in a midnight fire. To anyone watching, it seemed natural. Helen's house was just a few blocks from the fire scene. An old two-story white building. Outwardly orderly, but Carol felt something suffocating about it. Use the guest room upstairs. Carol felt uneasy about the room Helen showed them. A surveillance camera in the corner of the ceiling. For security, her mother-in-law said, but its position was clearly for monitoring the room. The first few days passed in confusion. Insurance investigators visited, beginning detailed investigation of the fire. The source appears to be the kitchen's electrical system. Carol narrowed her eyes at the investigators' words. She remembered checking all power sources last night. Police questioning also began. Was there anything unusual before or after the fire? Answering questions, Carol carefully chose her words. No evidence yet. But surely, something was wrong. Particularly concerning was Katie's condition. Usually active, she had become suddenly quiet since coming to her grandmother's house. Asthma attacks increased, coughing sounds heard at night. Don't worry. Grandma will take good care of you. Helen hovered around Katie with excessive attentiveness. Carol felt instinctive danger in that sight. At night, Mark frequently went out sighting work. Occasional whispered phone calls. Probably in contact with Jessica. Then, new reports from the insurance investigator. There are points we'd like to confirm about the life insurance contract. Carol's spine froze. Everything was connected. Her husband's debt, his mistress's existence, and the fire. Even this near imprisonment in this house might be part of the plan. Outside the window, the smell of fire still lingered. On the third night at her mother-in-law's house, while Carol spent another sleepless night in the upstairs guest room, she heard a small knock. Opening the door, Katie stood there. Tears glistened in her daughter's eyes. "Mama, I need to tell you something." A smartphone held out with trembling hands. Carol's heart began racing. "I've been recording Dad's phone calls." Katie's voice was hoarse. Her asthma symptoms clearly worsening from tension. "I'm sorry I couldn't tell you." "Katie." Carol held her daughter tightly. The small body trembling. Pressing the play button. First came conversations between Mark and Jessica. The debt amount, talk of insurance money, and detailed fire plans. Then, meetings with her mother-in-law. Everything clearly recorded. "We need to take this to the police." No hesitation in Carol's voice. However, that decision also meant new danger. The next morning, sitting down for breakfast as usual, she noticed something different about Helen's manner. On the table, a newspaper article about difficulties in the fire insurance investigation. Her mother-in-law's eyes unnaturally fixed on the article. The insurance might not pay out, Carol casually mentioned. In that instant, Helen's expression froze. Well, if that's the case, there are other ways. Her mother-in-law's words cut off mid-sentence. In her eyes was a coldness Carol had never seen before. That afternoon, Carol made her decision. Contact the police, inform them about Katie's recordings. At night, Katie's asthma suddenly worsened. Clearly different from usual attacks. The inhaler that should have been in the room was missing. Carol immediately noticed her daughter's change. Color rapidly draining, breathing more labored than usual attacks. It's okay, I'll get your medicine right away. As Carol searched the drawers, Helen's voice echoed from downstairs. Oh, I put away the medicine. That voice contained an intentional coldness never heard before. Quickly, the medicine. Holding her struggling daughter's hand, something connected in Carol's mind. Her daughter's symptoms worsening since coming to her mother-in-law's house wasn't coincidental. This was planned. I'll go get it. Gently kissing Katie's forehead, Carol stood up. Remember to breathe deeply. Mama will be right back. Going downstairs, she found not only Helen in the living room, but Mark and Jessica too. On the table was Katie's inhaler. And several unfamiliar medicine bottles. Looking for this. Helen picked up the inhaler. Her gesture clearly provocative. What did you do? Carol's voice remained calm. The nightmare from 20 years ago gave her strength. A smart woman like you must have figured it out by now. Helen smiled wickedly. I just made a small adjustment to her medicine. This way it'll look like an accidental death. The insurance money will surely. What have you done? Mark suddenly shouted. Involving a child wasn't part of the deal. Shut up. Helen's voice rang sharply. Getting cold feet now. The $400,000 debt. Escaping with your young mistress. Everything went according to my plan. I've recorded everything. Carol pulled out her smartphone. The screen showed an active call with the police. You made a big mistake targeting my daughter's life. At that moment, the front door burst open with a loud bang. Tension shot through the room. As Mark tried to flee toward the entrance, police officers rushed in. Jessica screamed, dropping her expensive handbag. The contents scattered across the floor, forged documents, USB drives, and a familiar insurance policy. All evidence. This isn't right. Helen's voice trembled. The perfect plan crumbling before her eyes. What's wrong is your assumption. Carol's voice mixed strength with sadness. You thought I was foolish. But you forgot. I lost my mother. That experience protected me and Katie. Police officers gathered evidence one after another. Tampered asthma medication from the kitchen, insurance fraud evidence from the study. And surveillance camera footage. Everything came to light. Mom, why? Mark's voice was hollow. For you, everything was for you. Helen's facade finally crumbled. My son, drowning in debt, deceived by that woman. Ma'am. A police officer approached Carol. Let us check your daughter's condition. Paramedics are arriving. Carol rushed back upstairs. Katie was already breathing more easily, being tended to by a nurse. Mama. It's okay. We're safe now. Weeks later, the trial began. The evidence was perfect. Attempted insurance fraud. Attempted murder. And most seriously, harm to a child. The verdicts came down. Mark Blake, 15 years imprisonment. Jessica Morrison, accomplice, 10 years imprisonment. Helen Blake, considering her age, 5 years probation. Descending the courthouse steps, Carol looked up at the sky. The spring sunlight was warm. Mama. Katie held her hand. What will happen to us now? We'll start a new life in a new place. Carol smiled gently. Together, we can overcome any difficulty. 1 year later, in a suburban Minnesota neighborhood. A small but bright house with a garden. Carol stood at the entrance, talking with new colleagues from the daycare center. Hey Mama. Katie ran up, returning from school. In her hand, a perfect math test. Her asthma attacks had completely settled down. That's wonderful. Carol hugged her daughter. The past nightmare had become strength that fortified them both. Posted at the entrance was a poster for the Fire Survivors group, started with community support. Carol used her experience to help others in similar situations. Mama. Katie whispered after finishing her homework. You know what? I've decided on my dream for the future. What kind of dream? I want to be someone who helps people in trouble, just like you. Carol smiled warmly. Outside the window, spring winds rustled new leaves. It seemed to be blessing the mother and daughter's new life. The trauma hadn't completely disappeared. But the strength gained from overcoming it now resided in their hearts as certain hope. The past can't be changed. But the future is different. Carol gently looked up at the sky. Your daughter has been in a traffic accident and is in critical condition, unconscious. Could you come right away? The location is. This happened when my daughter was in 3rd grade. When I received the call from the hospital, everything went dark before my eyes, but I knew my daughter must be in even more pain. After hearing which hospital she'd been taken to, I immediately drove there, praying for her safety in my heart. Please, please let my daughter be all right. My daughter's been in an accident and is in surgery now. Where are you? Please come quickly. I understand. I'll be right there. When the surgery was over and the doctor came out, I was shocked by what he told me. Your daughter's life is not in danger. However, due to spinal cord damage, paralysis of her lower body will be unavoidable. I'm very sorry we couldn't do more. Paralyzed from the waist down. No, this can't be true. The worst days of both my daughter's life and mine were about to begin, but this was just the prologue. Your daughter is pregnant. She appears to be about 4 months along. Considering her physical condition, termination would be advisable sooner rather than later, but please discuss this carefully together. For years after the accident, another tragedy struck us. While my daughter was terrified and in the depths of despair, my husband, inexplicably smirking, said something unthinkable. "My name is Vivian, and I'm 40 years old. My husband and I were like any loving newlywed couple when we first married, but now we barely speak to each other. He asked me out when I was a sophomore in high school, and although I initially planned to end it quickly, this was because I had trauma from a previous relationship with a male classmate. That classmate had also confessed to me, which led to our relationship, but he turned out to be a terrible person, and I was foolish not to notice. He cheated on me and blamed me whenever I complained about our dates, so we only dated for about a month. After that experience, I was determined not to date anyone, so I initially rejected my future husband's confession. Won't you please give up? I don't want to date anyone. Please reconsider. I promise I won't bore you, and I'm serious about this. You're the only one for me. If you try dating me and don't like it, we can break up immediately, and I promise I won't pursue you anymore." Seeing his earnest expression, I felt sorry for him and agreed to try going on a date. True to his word, he was attentive during our date, and although he was clearly nervous since it was his first date too, that only showed his sincerity, which made me laugh. We were able to have honest conversations, and by the end of the date, I thought he was a good person. However, that alone wasn't enough for me to trust my future husband completely. The shock from my previous relationship was too great, and I couldn't simply be happy about it. "I had fun today, but I can't decide whether to date you just from one date. When should we meet next?" "That's more than enough for now. I'm free anytime, so how about tomorrow? I feel like I got to know you a little better today, so let's enjoy our next date too." After forcefully securing our next date, he practically skipped away. He must have been really happy about getting to date me. Though I smiled wryly, I wasn't entirely opposed to it either, thinking I'd finally met someone good. After several more dates, he confessed to me again. "Please go out with me officially. I'm absolutely certain that I'm the only one who can make you happy, which is why I'm asking you now, with complete conviction." "All right, I give up. You win." If he loved me this much and showed such perseverance despite being rejected multiple times, I figured he wouldn't betray me, and more than anything, I was touched by his promise to make me happy. My husband devoted himself to me, and I tried to respond in kind by working on my appearance, consulting friends about fashion and beauty, things I'd never paid much attention to before. I still remember how he would rejoice as if it were his own achievement when he saw me becoming prettier day by day, often complimenting me. "Wow, you're beautiful today too. I'm actually worried lately that other men might try to steal you away." "What are you talking about? You're the only one I love. Besides, you better not be looking at other girls either, right?" When I saw him blush at my flirtation and then declared that I was the only one he could see, I couldn't help but smile. By college, while we weren't exactly what you'd call a stunning couple, we were attractive enough to turn maybe one head out of 100. Of course, this meant we received some envious glances, and my friends would tease us about the looks we got during lectures. After 6 years of dating, he proposed when we graduated from college, and I accepted. My parents, knowing about my previous relationship, were unusually flustered when they heard I was bringing home a fiancé, but his sincerity must have won them over because they eventually gave us their blessing. After meeting his parents too, I became concerned about his reaction when the topic of children came up. We want children soon, right? I can't wait to see what kind of child we'll have. Do you prefer a boy or a girl? Either is fine. But more importantly, where should we have the wedding ceremony? I'd like to hear your opinion. Oh, I suppose I'm getting ahead of myself, since I'm not even pregnant yet. Whenever the topic of children came up, my husband would obviously change the subject, which made me wonder, but I kept my concerns to myself for the time being. However, both our parents had us when they were over 40, so they kept pressing us about wanting to see their grandchildren before they passed away, which left me troubled about what to do. When I consulted my husband about this, he said, "I don't have confidence in raising children. Besides, can't we just enjoy our time together a little longer? We can think about it after that, right? But we need to consider your parents and my parents' feelings too. And I want children like any normal person would." Seeing me deflated, my husband must have had some thoughts of his own. Though reluctantly, he accepted the idea of children, and at 25, I finally became pregnant. At that time, I was moved to tears by the miracle of having a life growing inside me, and our parents were even more overjoyed than I was. However, my husband alone maintained a difficult expression throughout, and after learning of my pregnancy, his behavior gradually became strange. During my pregnancy, while I would sing to my growing belly and talk to our future child, my husband became increasingly cold. "Hey, why don't you try talking to the baby a little? They might respond to voices they hear in the womb. Or if that's too hard, you could at least help with the housework. Stop it. You know I've never been excited about having children. I feel it more and more as your belly grows each day. And I absolutely refuse to do your housework. Please. I'll probably be dealing with morning sickness and other health issues soon. You're all I have to rely on." "Fine. But only until you give birth." While I was grateful that he agreed to take on the housework, I felt guilty about causing him stress over the baby and had a lingering anxiety. Will everything be all right after the baby is born? I stroked my belly, hoping for peace in our married life ahead. The following year, I successfully gave birth to a girl. My husband was present for the delivery, and both sets of parents rushed to the hospital to celebrate the new life. Our daughter grew steadily, and watching her development became my daily routine. I would show videos I took on my smartphone to our parents, and I truly felt glad that I had given birth to her. However, inversely proportional to this joy, my husband's attitude worsened, and we began having more conflicts recently. While I was busy as a full-time housewife with housework and childcare, my husband would just watch TV or play with his phone. "You could help out a little more. I understand you're tired from work, but I'm not always free either. I practically did all the housework when you were pregnant, didn't I? I deserve some rest now. Besides, you've been completely focused on the baby since giving birth. This is why I was against it. Then you should have discussed it with me and our parents before we had a child. You were the one who ultimately agreed. Don't push the responsibility onto me. That was because of your request, and I couldn't refuse. You understand, right? You know how much I love you. I know how much he loves me, but I can definitively say it's wrong to neglect our daughter because of that. If he felt that way, maybe we should have waited longer before having a child. However, we can't turn back time, and the reality of my husband's non-cooperation in child-rearing remains unchanged. Fine. Let's make a deal. I'll handle all of our daughter's care. In return, you'll do all your own housework. That should be fair, right? My husband nodded, and that ended our discussion for the day. From then on, our conversations were limited to greetings when he left for work and before bed, with everything else becoming completely businesslike, devoid of any affection. Still, I wanted to believe. I wanted to believe in the day when my husband would become actively involved in raising our child, when we could become a real family. However, when our daughter was around 10 years old, I received a phone call from the hospital that left me frozen in place. Your daughter has been in a traffic accident and is in critical condition. Could you please come right away? After hearing which hospital she'd been taken to, I immediately drove there, praying in my heart for my daughter's safety. Please, please let my daughter be all right. When I arrived at the hospital, I met the parents of my daughter's classmate, who immediately thanked and apologized to me. We heard about what happened. Your daughter protected our son when a car went out of control and nearly hit him while they were walking home from school. I see. Is your son all right? Thankfully, he only had minor injuries, and the other children were safe too. But I didn't need to hear more. I knew my daughter was behind those doors with the surgery light on. While I wondered why this had to happen to my daughter, I also felt proud learning that she had protected the boy. I had always told my daughter to cherish her friends, drawing from my own experiences as a student. True friends are those who face your honest feelings head-on. Even if you're bullied or someone laughs at your efforts, there's always someone who takes you seriously. That's hard to understand. But I get that it's important to cherish friends. Since she was acting on those teachings, how could I blame myself when my daughter wouldn't regret her actions? All I could do now was focus on praying for her surgery to be successful. The classmates' parents had other matters to attend to and left after bowing to me. I decided to call my husband. Our daughter's been in a traffic accident and is in surgery now. Where are you? Please come quickly. My husband simply replied, "Understood," and hung up. A few minutes later, he arrived, and after I explained the situation, he let out a sigh and showed concern for my well-being. I couldn't believe he was more worried about me than our daughter who had just been in an accident, but I kept quiet, knowing that arguing now would accomplish nothing. The surgery continued until late into the night. When the clock struck 2 a.m., the light went off, and the doctor emerged from the operating room. I immediately asked about my daughter's condition, but the response was devastating. Your daughter's life is not in danger. However, due to spinal cord damage, paralysis of her lower body will be unavoidable. I'm very sorry we couldn't do more. Paralyzed from the waist down. No, this can't be. My brain refused to process the doctor's words. Would my daughter never walk again? Never run again? Would she have to live in a wheelchair? I started screaming, and although my husband apparently tried to comfort me while holding me, I don't remember much after that. I just remember collapsing there, crying and screaming. After that, a nightmarish life began for me. My relationship with my husband, who was never enthusiastic about parenting to begin with, deteriorated further. He spent more and more days away from home and never visited our daughter in the hospital. Still, he at least transferred money from his salary for our daughter's hospital expenses, allowing us to maintain some semblance of life. The person responsible for the traffic accident was arrested at the scene. The cause was determined to be the driver losing control on a curve while rushing to work. The male driver apparently thought he could manage the turn since it was a road he always used. Of course, we received compensation, but that couldn't restore my daughter's body and spirit. When I told my daughter about her paralysis, it was heartbreaking. Why? Why? I didn't do anything wrong. I'll never be able to stand up or run around with everyone else again. How am I supposed to live? Someone, please tell me. It was an anguished cry lamenting both her personal tragedy and the injustice of the world. I couldn't bear it, and we both cried together for a while. Later, medical examinations confirmed that my daughter had completely lost sensation in her lower body, and rehabilitation wouldn't improve her condition. At this point, I resolved to become her caregiver. I started learning about caregiving by researching online and getting guidance from nurses, but it turned out to be more physically demanding than I'd expected. My daughter couldn't use the bathroom or take baths by herself, so I had to be with her constantly. I considered hiring a home care worker after her discharge, but my daughter adamantly refused. Since she was still adjusting to her accident and feeling vulnerable, I thought it would be better if I stayed by her side. I dedicated almost all of my daily life to caring for her. After about a year, I became more skilled at caregiving, but my relationship with my husband had completely frozen over. My husband had transformed into a wretch who would yell at me every time we met, and I began considering divorce. Yet I couldn't take that step because of lingering affection for him and the fact that he was our only source of income. 3 more years passed, and our marriage had reached its worst point, with us meeting only once every few months. Just as we were starting to consider my daughter's discharge from the hospital, something happened. While I was providing routine care for my daughter, she started experiencing nausea, drowsiness, and fatigue, so we decided to run some tests as a precaution. Your daughter is pregnant. She appears to be about 4 months along. Considering her physical condition, termination would be advisable sooner rather than later, but please discuss this carefully together. Pregnant? What do you mean? She can't even move by herself. What is this? Someone must have attacked my daughter. As I became increasingly agitated, aware of my rising voice, I heard my daughter sobbing, which brought me back to my senses. We returned to her hospital room, and when I asked for details, she suddenly started apologizing. I'm sorry. When I was attacked, I was actually awake. But I was too scared to open my eyes. It happened late at night, and I thought if I didn't get pregnant, I could just keep quiet about it. Why didn't you tell me right away? If you had, we could have talked to the doctors. I stopped mid-sentence, noticing my daughter trembling. Of course, she had been sexually assaulted. How could I expect her to talk about it easily? Because I didn't want to trouble you, and I didn't want to remember it, my daughter said through her tears, pouring out her feelings. Seeing my daughter cry as she confessed this, I cursed the world. Why did my daughter alone have to face such tragedies? This incident led to my daughter developing depression, and I felt like I was about to break. I reported this to my husband as well, and we planned to have a family meeting to discuss what to do next, but he came in with an unthinkable smile, saying something horrible. "Well, this means we can get compensation for sexual assault too. Isn't that good? This will secure your daughter's future and your lifestyle." What? What are you saying? Our daughter was raped. And all you can talk about is money. How morally corrupt are you? That day, our argument escalated, and if our parents hadn't stopped us, there might have been bloodshed. Since it was impossible to have a proper discussion, we decided to cool our heads. I left our daughter's care to our parents and returned home for the first time in a while. As expected, my husband wasn't home, which made it the perfect place for me to calm my thoughts. I can't trust my husband anymore. I need to be there for my daughter, even if I'm the only one. I will definitely find the perpetrator and make them pay for their crimes. At this point, I resolved to divorce my husband. First, I reported my daughter's assault to the police, insisting they thoroughly investigate and definitely catch the culprit. In parallel, I hired a private investigator to gather evidence for the divorce and terminated the lease on our apartment. Though it was a place filled with memories of life with my husband and daughter, I had no intention of returning to that life, so this was a symbol of my determination. I returned to my parents' home and discussed the divorce with them. "You've been through so much already. Why don't you rest for a while? We can take care of your daughter for now." "That's right. Have you noticed how exhausted you are from years of caregiving? You look like a completely different person from when you first married that man." When my parents said this, I looked at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. Before marrying my husband, I used to take great care with my fashion and makeup, wanting him to compliment me. Now I was unrecognizable, having lost over 20 pounds from stress. I realized I was more exhausted than I'd thought. My parents had occasionally helped with caregiving, and my daughter was fond of them, so I felt comfortable leaving her in their care. As I renewed my appreciation for my parents' strength and support, my daughter gradually began to open up, with help from her counselor. The nurse told me that during counseling, my daughter had said something like this: "I wonder if Mom's going to get back at Dad." She said she'd leave it to the police, but I can't accept that. I know doing nothing is probably the right answer, but human hearts aren't that simple. When I heard this from the nurse, I thought she had a point. I had hired the private investigator but had only been thinking about divorce, not revenge. That's right, divorce alone wouldn't be enough to truly hurt my husband. If we're going to do this, let's do it thoroughly. I contacted the investigator again, requesting a complete investigation of my husband's activities. The investigator seemed surprised by my intensity, but when I offered to pay additional fees, they must have sensed my determination and accepted my request. After waiting for 3 months of thorough investigation results, I visited the apartment where my husband was living. When he emerged from the room, he was a different person from the man I had dated. His hair was full of dandruff, his clothes were shabby, and he looked nothing like his former self. "It's been a while. I have something to discuss with you. Could you let me in for now?" After a brief greeting, he led me into his cramped one-room apartment, where we sat down, and I got straight to the point. "You know why I'm here today, right? It's overdue, but I want a divorce. We're already completely separated, and you don't mind, right?" The reason I hadn't divorced despite our cold relationship was partly because I hadn't had the capacity to think about it, and partly because somewhere in my heart, I still wanted to believe in him. Where had that pure-hearted man who confessed to me in high school gone? I thought maybe he was still there, deep inside. However, after hearing my daughter's words and receiving encouragement from my parents, I had no hesitation about divorcing him. But his answer was no. I refuse. I don't want to separate from you. You and I are meant to be married for life. I absolutely won't allow a divorce. Won't allow it. What is this man saying? He never helped with raising our child, didn't help care for our daughter after she became paralyzed from the accident, and when our marriage deteriorated, he ran away. I unleashed all my pent-up frustrations, anger, and sadness at him. Don't be ridiculous. How dare you say such things? I don't know what you've been thinking all this time, but if you truly cared about me, you should have at least pretended to smile for our daughter's sake. Even if it was just pretense, I wanted you by my side, supporting me. Even if it was just an act, I wanted you to live with us as a father. Though saying this now wouldn't change anything, I couldn't hold it in anymore. Finally, crying, I poured out all my feelings and thrust the divorce papers at him. Write your name yourself. I'll submit them to the city office. My husband listened to everything I had to say, appearing both depressed and trembling with anger, but suddenly he started speaking rapidly. I may not understand how hard it's been for you, but you don't know how hard it's been for me either. After we had the child, I was lonely. Watching you become more focused on our daughter day by day, I almost went crazy with jealousy. That's why I deliberately created discord, trying to get your attention back on me. Don't I deserve at least that? What a selfish perspective. I don't know how much pain my husband endured. However, it's too convenient to try to save only himself by taking it out on others. Like I said before, if you loved me, I wanted you by my side, even if it was just pretense. Even if his pure feelings from when we were dating had faded, if he had supported me when I was about to break down after our daughter's accident, things might have turned out completely differently. But it's too late now. My decision to divorce is final. Sign these papers now. If you absolutely refuse, I'll call your parents here and explain everything. No. What about my feelings? What am I supposed to do with my love for you? What will I do when you're gone? In his dazed state, my husband signed the divorce papers as if being controlled by something, and I submitted them to the city office. Now all that was left was to wait for the police investigation to reveal who had attacked my daughter. 1 month later. When I heard the results of the police investigation, I was frozen in place, just as I had been when I first learned of my daughter's traffic accident. The person who attacked your daughter was your husband's friend. Moreover, our investigation revealed that your husband was involved, and it seems they had been engaging in some very dangerous activities. I see. What happened to my husband? Both men have been arrested. They are currently being interrogated. We will contact you as soon as we have more details. Thank you very much. After hanging up the phone, I found myself laughing involuntarily at the surreal situation. It was a laugh born of anger and sadness. I could never forgive my husband, of course, but his friend was equally unforgivable. I wanted to go confront them immediately, shower them with verbal abuse, and make them regret being born, but I held back for my daughter's sake. My daughter hadn't lost her life. Rather than pursuing revenge, I thought it would be better for my mental health to focus solely on my daughter and find hope in the possibility of starting over together. When I reported to my daughter that everything had been settled, she said, "So this chapter is finally over. I need to do my best from now on too. I hope Dad, no, ex-Dad, gets what he deserves." Seeing my daughter smile, I started crying, which made her laugh, and we ended up laughing together for a while. I later learned that after I gave birth, my husband had started frequenting nightlife districts to ease his loneliness, and that's where he met this friend through social media. This friend turned out to be an extremely dangerous person, and my husband, who was scattered in various places, had borrowed money from loan sharks because he was struggling financially. However, having no means to repay, my husband was naturally pursued by debt collectors, and while moving from place to place, he was coerced by this friend into committing terrible acts against women. Though he apparently drew the line at directly assaulting our daughter, that makes no difference to me or my daughter, he's equally guilty. My husband and his friend were arrested, and I filed for damages. Furthermore, other women who had been victims came forward and pressed charges for sexual assault, and they were both found guilty. My husband was ordered to pay substantial compensation, and my former in-laws were devastated. Even if my husband is released, he'll spend his days being chased by debt collectors, and with his parents disowning him, he'll have nowhere to go. When I reported this to my parents, they were even more overjoyed than I was, crying with relief. "You've done so well. Let's continue supporting each other as a family. I'm finally getting used to taking care of my granddaughter." Yes, and lately I've had excess energy from being more active. I'm thinking of starting a vegetable garden. Dad, Mom, thank you. I think our daughter would enjoy eating vegetables from the home garden. It would be nice if we could live peacefully after she's discharged. We all looked forward to our future together. Although finding a second marriage in my 40s might be hopeless, I feel that as long as I have my daughter, that's not a problem for me. Perhaps because everything with my husband and daughter had been resolved, my daughter, with help from the hospital counselor, had almost completely recovered from her depression. When she said she wanted to give birth to the child she was carrying, we were all shocked, including my parents. Watching you, I realized I want to be a mother like you. But raising a child is hard, isn't it? I know I'll need help. Would that be okay? Of course. There's no reason to refuse. Right, Mom and Dad? Well, that would make us great-grandparents. It feels like just yesterday we were excited about having a grandchild. But I have no objections either. Yes, I agree too. We'll all help out. At least until you find someone special. My parents are both over 80 now, and although they're still energetic, their health could decline at any time. I also need to find a job now that I'm divorced from my husband. While we can manage for a while with the divorce settlement and compensation, we'll definitely need money for my daughter's child and the future. However, I want to respect my daughter's wishes. Leave it to us. Don't worry about money. You just focus on getting discharged. We have one more thing to look forward to now. And you need to start thinking like a mother too. My daughter gave a wry smile as she looked forward to her discharge next month. The following month, she was successfully discharged, and while receiving care from me and my parents, she developed a motherly expression as she watched her growing belly day by day. I remember being like that too. While reminiscing about those days, I taught her about motherhood, sharing my experiences. Thanks to all this support, my daughter safely gave birth to a girl. Though the delivery was lengthy due to her paralysis, there were no abnormalities with the baby, who was perfectly healthy. This seemed to become my daughter's motivation to live. After being discharged with her child, she began studying earnestly, and 2 years later, she started attending a correspondence high school. While surprised by the change in her outlook, I look forward to continuing to watch my daughter's growth from close by. It had been almost 3 days since I lost contact with my husband. Although he said he wouldn't respond for a while, I was starting to get worried. Just as I was thinking I might need to contact the police, I received a phone call from his subordinate. "Your husband has died in an accident." What? I couldn't comprehend why she was calling me. But I couldn't think about that now. I rushed to the hospital. There, I found my husband in a tragically altered state. My name is Penelope, and I'm 28 years old. I married 2 years ago and live with my husband while working at an IT company. Though we want children someday, we don't have any yet. My husband's name is Jake. He's 2 years older than me and very dedicated to his work. Just recently, there was talk of his promotion. That day, as soon as he got home from work, he rushed to me excitedly. "Penelope, listen. I might get a promotion." "Really? That's wonderful. I'm so happy." There were tough times, but it was worth working hard. "Jake, you've been working so many weekends. I'm really happy for you, congratulations." My husband was so devoted to his work that he even went to the office on Saturdays. He often came home late from overtime, just before midnight. Though I worried about his intense workload, it had finally paid off. Seeing him so happy made me feel happy too. I felt motivated to work harder myself. However, since that day, I started noticing something odd about Jake's behavior. His overtime increased even more than before, with weekday returns after midnight. His weekend work, which used to be just a few times a month, gradually increased until last month when he was even going to the office on Sundays. Not only that, but his attitude toward me seemed to grow colder. We used to go out together on our days off, but lately, that stopped too. Isn't this strange? Despite such an intense workload, why doesn't he show any signs of fatigue? Concerned, I decided to carefully ask him about it. I waited for him to return from overtime and brought up the topic. "Hey Jake, do you have a minute?" "What?" "I'm tired and want to go to bed. You've been coming home late lately, but you're always on your phone before bed. Aren't you getting enough sleep?" "What are you trying to say?" "How I use my free time is my business, isn't it?" "That's true, but..." "Hey, are you really that busy at work?" At my question, his expression froze for a moment. Noticing this, I pressed on. "I understand there's a lot to do with the promotion, but isn't this too much? You're working too many weekends, and isn't it bad for the company to overwork employees?" "I can't help it. It's not like I want to work overtime and weekends. But isn't it too much? You don't understand my work. Stop meddling when I come home tired." With that, Jake stormed out of the living room. After that, my unease didn't subside. Then one day, while driving home from work as usual, I got into an accident. Another car rear-ended me, and I was taken to the hospital by ambulance. I was bruised all over. They wanted to run some tests to be safe, and I was told I needed to stay in the hospital for a few days. I called my husband to bring me some clothes and necessities. However, no matter how many times I called, he wouldn't answer, nor did he respond to my messages. Work should be over by now, so why? Until now, he could at least exchange messages even during overtime. I kept calling every few minutes, and finally got through an hour later. As I tried to explain the situation, he immediately let out a heavy sigh. Sigh. How annoying. Can't you figure out I'm working overtime when I don't answer? Sorry, but this can't wait. What do you mean? Actually, I got into an accident on my way home from work and have to be hospitalized. I'm bruised all over, but they say it's not life-threatening. An accident? Ugh, why are you causing such trouble? His unexpected response made me gasp, what? As I was lost for words, he continued mercilessly. Don't get into accidents when I'm busy. I'm not paying for the car repairs, got it? I understand. But more importantly, I need you to bring me some clothes. What? Why should I have to do that? I'm tired from work, and I'm not going to the hospital for some idiot who got into an accident due to carelessness. What kind of punishment game is this? Idiot? Why are you talking like that? Besides, the accident wasn't my fault, it was the other driver's. Shut up with your excuses. Anyway, I'm not coming, and I won't respond for a while. Figure it out yourself. The call ended there. The dial tone echoed in my ear, making me feel cornered. Before I knew it, I was crying. Why would he say such things? Isn't he worried that his wife got into an accident? He used to prioritize me over work before. I would get the clothes myself if I could. My parents lived too far away to ask them for help. After that, I sent many messages to my husband, but he never brought my belongings. I had to buy everything I needed from the hospital store. I tried contacting my husband several times after that, but 3 days passed without any response. Although he said he wouldn't respond for a while, I was starting to get worried. This much silence is unusual. Could he have gotten into an accident too? Such anxiety crossed my mind. Just then, I heard a knock on my hospital room door. When I said, "Come in," my close colleague Vicky came to visit. Vicky. You came. Thank you. When I tried to contact you because you'd been away from work, I heard you were in an accident. I was so surprised. It's just bruises and a fracture, nothing too serious. That's serious enough. But I'm glad you're doing okay. For a while after that, we chatted about various things. As visiting hours were ending and Vicky was preparing to leave, she suddenly stopped moving and showed a troubled expression. Seeing her looking like she wanted to say something, I nervously asked, "Vicky, is something wrong?" "I'm sorry, Penelope. I know this isn't the time to say this, but I saw something." "Saw what?" Your husband, walking with Claire. What? When was this? 3 days ago. Claire, whom Vicky mentioned, is a junior colleague at the same company. When she was a new employee, I was her trainer. Even now, years later, we still have lunch together once a week. Why would she be with Jake? The last time Jake and Claire met was at our wedding. Could it be that time? Although I thought it impossible, the worst scenario started forming in my mind. According to Vicky, she saw my husband and Claire with a suitcase 3 days ago. Since then, Claire has been on leave. Fearfully, I called my husband's company, and my suspicions were confirmed. My husband had also taken leave starting 3 days ago. At that moment, my doubts turned to certainty. My beloved husband and the junior colleague I had cared for. To be betrayed simultaneously by 2 people I trusted. Probably, the increase in his overtime and weekend work was because he was meeting her. No, perhaps they had been involved even before that. As I recalled my husband's suspicious behavior, more and more things started making sense. Ah, so that's why he became so cold. It all fell into place surprisingly easily. Unconsciously, I was calling my husband. Over these past few days, thinking he wouldn't answer anyway, I had barely tried contacting him. He probably wouldn't answer after just a few calls. But I couldn't let them do as they pleased. I kept calling until he would pick up. After 30 minutes of calling, my husband finally answered with an irritated voice. What is it? You're so persistent. I told you I wouldn't respond for a while. Why? Are you too busy to even answer calls from your wife? Of course. I'm working every day. Even though you're on leave until tomorrow. What kind of work are you doing? Probably thinking he hadn't been found out yet, my husband stumbled over his words for a moment. Still thinking he could deceive me, he quickly started making excuses. What are you talking about? I haven't taken any leave. It's useless to pretend. I've already confirmed with your company. Well, actually, I suddenly wanted to relax. I've been taking it easy at home these past few days. Oh really, with Claire? Even preparing a suitcase. I know everything. Just confess. My voice rose uncharacteristically. Then my husband, realizing he couldn't hide it anymore, showed his true colors. Oh well. So you found out. That's right, I'm on vacation with Claire. Now that you know, stop bothering us, you ugly woman. So it was true. Why? Why with Claire? Isn't it obvious? Because she's younger and prettier than you. Are we done here? We're in the middle of a fun trip, stop interfering. Don't worry, I'll divorce you when I get back. He ended with, see ya, and hung up. My love for my husband instantly turned to hatred. Unforgivable. To be betrayed in such a terrible way. I won't let them do as they please. I'll make sure they go through hell. Thus, I decided to take revenge on them. However, before I could act, divine punishment would befall them. The next day, I was discharged from the hospital and could move around somewhat. As I opened my phone to look for a law office to help with my revenge against my husband and Claire, I received a call. The screen showed Claire's name, my husband's mistress. Though surprised for a moment, I couldn't run away now. I steeled myself and answered the phone. Hello? Penelope. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Shouldn't you apologize in person? That's common courtesy. You're right. But this can't wait. Claire's voice was trembling. Then she said something I couldn't believe. Your husband has died in an accident. What? The shock was so great I couldn't find the right words. Confused but managing to respond to Claire, dead? What are you talking about? Jake is on a trip with you, right? Yes, that's true, but on our way home, we got into an accident. According to Claire, they had gotten into an accident while driving home from the airport. Jake was hit by a car, and although she immediately called an ambulance, he didn't move at all. Even more surprisingly, Jake was transported to the same hospital where I was staying. I immediately hung up and explained the situation to the nurse, then headed to my husband's location. My fracture hadn't fully healed, so I had to move with crutches. Having heard he had died, I thought I would be led to the morgue, but surprisingly, Jake was still alive. However, he was seriously injured. Shortly after I arrived, Claire rushed in out of breath. When she saw Jake lying in the bed and realized he was still alive, her legs gave out right there. Although I had plenty to say, Jake was in critical condition. I told Claire we would talk properly another time, and we all went home for the day. A few days later, although Jake managed to survive, the accident left him paralyzed from the waist down, forcing him to use a wheelchair. His parents rushed to the hospital and were furious when they learned about the affair trip. Though they must have had mixed feelings seeing their son in such a state, they clearly scolded him, saying, "This is what you get for having an affair." After his parents left, I called Claire and decided to have a talk with the three of us in my husband's hospital room. When I arrived at his room, to my surprise, they were having a loud argument. If you hadn't pushed me then, this wouldn't have happened to me. This is all your fault. What? You're the one who said we should take that road. Don't blame others. What? First of all, this happened because you wanted to go on a trip. I even paid for all the travel expenses. Return the money. Pay for my medical treatment too. You damaged the man you love, of course you should compensate. Don't be ridiculous. Who would seriously fall for a man like you? This was just for fun. I never want to see you again. Apparently unaware of my presence, they continued their unbearable argument. I had reached my limit. I forcefully opened the door to the hospital room, took a deep breath, and shouted at them. That's enough. This happened because you had an affair in the first place. Take your blame games somewhere else. Oh, Penelope. Finally noticing my presence, their faces tensed up. Facing their shocked expressions, I continued undeterred. How can you still fight in this situation? Do you understand the position you're in? Jake was the first to answer my question. Penelope. Don't worry. I'm breaking up with this stupid woman. Oh really? And then? Well, I realized you're the only one for me. What? What are you saying now? We're getting divorced, right? Huh? I couldn't help but laugh at my husband's dumbfounded face as he stared at me with wide eyes. You said it yourself, didn't you? That we'd divorce when you got back from the trip. Or what? Now that you've fought with your mistress, you want to continue being married to me. Are you stupid? No sane person would share their life with a jerk like you. Penelope, why? Didn't you love me? Don't be ridiculous. Who betrayed that love first? It was you. You talked big about getting divorced, but now that things aren't going your way, you want to get back together. I'm not as cheap as you think. Get it? Never show your face to me again. Live with regret for the rest of your life. You scumbag. My husband was in a daze from my shouting. Claire had turned pale and was trembling violently. Later, I was discharged and decided to return to my parents' home for a while. After that, through a lawyer, my divorce from Jake was finalized. I properly demanded compensation from him and Claire, which they paid in full. Jake lost his job over this incident. Apparently, he had been claiming the money he used for the affair as company expenses. He was promptly fired. All that remained for him were damage claims from the company. With his paralyzed body, finding new employment would probably be difficult. It didn't take long for the news of Claire's affair with my husband to spread throughout the company. Everyone started giving her cold looks, and unable to bear the atmosphere, Claire began taking unauthorized absences. As a result, I heard she finally submitted her resignation. Those two will probably never be able to live a normal life again. Still, I feel no sympathy for them. This is a disaster they brought upon themselves. As for me, I rented an apartment near the company and started a new life. Many colleagues approach me out of concern or curiosity, but honestly, my feelings are complicated and hard to describe. But such petty gossip will soon die down. Now I want to enjoy my life for myself, without being swayed by others. I woke up before my alarm clock rang. August in Arizona is hot even before dawn. In our Section 8 apartment in the quiet residential area of Paradise Valley, only the hum of the old air conditioner broke the silence in our second-floor home. The clock showed 6 a.m. There was still time before my afternoon shift at Desert Ridge Marketplace. Through the window, the eastern sky was beginning to turn slightly orange. The shadow of Camelback Mountain was slowly dissolving in the morning sun. I'm Jennifer Clark, 35 years old. For the past 3 years, I've been working as a barista at the mall's Starbucks. My income of $17 per hour plus tips doesn't allow for luxuries, but things have gotten a bit easier since my promotion to shift leader. I haven't given up on my dream from my community college accounting days. With the help of food stamps and Medicaid, I'm slowly saving up to get my accountant certification someday. At the gardening club after Sunday church, I exchange information and encouragement with other single mothers like myself. Standing in the kitchen, I start preparing Michael's lunch. My 6-year-old son is in kindergarten at Desert View Elementary School. He's such a responsible child that he was chosen as Student of the Month in Mrs. Johnson's class. He's good at singing hymns in Sunday school and is beloved by the church teachers. Good morning, Mom. Before 7 o'clock, Michael appears in the kitchen, earlier than usual. I smile softly at his gesture of helping with the dishes while still in his pajamas. His thoughtful nature must be innate. Are you going to basketball practice today? Yes. To get into the NBA, I need to practice every day. His dream is to become a professional basketball player. It's encouraging to see him practice daily at the park court. But sometimes, he shows a lonely expression, as if remembering his father. Just before 8 o'clock, we get into my used Toyota Corolla. The engine's not running great, but it still gets us where we need to go. After dropping him at school, I'll shop at Dollar Tree. I need to take winter clothes to the cleaners too. In the evening, I'll pick up my son again. Cooking dinner together is our precious time. On weekends, we have picnics at the nearby park. It's modest, but there's genuine happiness. Mom, do your best today too. Michael waves at the school gate. His smile is my greatest treasure. Driving to school, I sometimes look at my son through the rearview mirror. 2 years since the divorce. Memories of my ex-husband Steven still linger in the depths of my heart. He's a 37-year-old construction worker at a local company. Initially, he was a kind husband and good father. When Michael was born, he visited the hospital daily and eagerly helped care for our newborn. But 3 years ago, when his company downsized and his salary decreased, he began to change gradually. It started with horse racing. "I'll definitely win it back," he'd say, spending his salary. Then came online gambling. The debts grew, and strange men would show up at our house in the middle of the night. When I begged him to stop, he'd explode with anger, yelling at me in front of Michael. The final straw was when he tried to take Michael's Medicaid card. When I saw him attempting to use our son's medical expenses for gambling money, I made my decision. I fled to a nearby DV shelter and proceeded with divorce proceedings with support from the church. Now there are visits twice a month. Child support payments are irregular, last month's was late too. But for Michael's sake, I can't complain. I heard he recently started living with his new girlfriend. Rachel, apparently she works at a real estate company. When can I see Dad next? Sometimes Michael asks this. Seeing my son looking forward to visitation days stirs complicated feelings. But I firmly believe he has the right to love both parents equally. This is what I vowed to myself during the divorce. Desert View Elementary School comes into view. Some children are already playing in the schoolyard. Mrs. Johnson, Michael's teacher, is greeting students at the gate. She understands my situation well and always shows consideration for my son. "Michael, did you finish all your homework?" "Yeah. I did it properly even while playing with Dad." My son's voice is cheerful as he talks about yesterday's visitation. Steven seems to be valuing his time with our son lately. Maybe it's his new girlfriend's influence. Before getting out of the car, Michael flashed me a smile from the back seat. At that moment, my chest tightened. The divorce was the right decision. Even though things are tough now, I believe we can build a new life together, just the two of us. There's still time before my Starbucks shift begins. After finishing the morning drop-off, I head to Dollar Tree again today. While looking for sale items, I calculate our household budget. I need to use food stamps wisely and increase our savings bit by bit. The moment the alarm clock struck 6 o'clock, I was already awake. Since last night, some nagging anxiety wouldn't go away. Yesterday was visitation day. Stephen seemed unusually attentive to Michael's care. I start preparing pancakes in the kitchen. While pouring the mix bought from Dollar Tree into a bowl, I wondered, what kind of time did Michael spend with his father yesterday? Usually, he'd enthusiastically tell me about all the fun things they did. Michael, time to wake up. The moment I opened my son's bedroom door, something felt off. Michael's cheeks were noticeably red as he lay in bed. Are you feeling sick? When I touched his forehead, it definitely felt warm. Just a slight fever, but I'm worried. Mom. I want to go to school. Michael says in a weak voice. But he won't touch the pancakes. He's hugging his new backpack, looking like he wants to say something, gripping unusually tight the bag he got from Stephen yesterday. Maybe you should stay home. My chest tightens. Today is an important shift. If I take time off, this month's budget will be tight. Even with Medicaid, unexpected expenses are scary. In the end, he decided to go to school. In the car, Michael was unusually quiet. At every red light, I check on him in the rearview mirror. Several times he starts to say, "Dad," but stops himself. At 10 a.m., my phone rings. Mrs. Clark. Michael is resting in the nurse's office. Hearing Mrs. Johnson's voice, I made an immediate decision. I'll come right away. I called my supervisor and got permission to take time off. My foot pressed harder on the accelerator. Michael looked worse than I'd imagined as he lay in the nurse's office. He seemed worried and couldn't concentrate in class. I nodded at the nurse's explanation while holding my son's hand. Sorry, Mom. Michael apologizes in a weak voice. While classmates peek in with concern, I complete the early dismissal procedures. Back at the apartment, first comes hydration. I search the kitchen cabinet for oral rehydration solution from our last hospital visit. I also prepare apple juice bought with food stamps, adding ice. Drink it slowly, okay? I rub Michael's back as he lies on the sofa. His forehead seems a bit cooler. But there's another kind of anxiety visible in my son's expression. About Dad. Suddenly Michael starts to speak but stops. Still hugging his new backpack, he falls silent again. Did something happen during yesterday's visit? The clock shows 11 o'clock. There's still time before the afternoon shift. Michael has started taking a light nap. Looking at his sleeping face, I'm lost in thought. Stephen's child support payments have become irregular lately. Maybe something changed since he started living with Rachel. At 12:30, the thermometer shows a normal temperature. Just as I'm breathing a sigh of relief, Michael suddenly sits up. Mom, I want to go shopping. This unexpected request catches me off guard. But you're still not feeling. I'm okay. I'm better now. There was something urgent in his voice. As if there was a reason he had to go shopping. I check my wallet contents. Food stamps card, cash, and bill statements. While making today's shopping list, I iron my uniform. Are you really okay? Yes. Michael stares out the window while tightly hugging his new backpack. His body trembles slightly whenever he mentions Dad. The change in his behavior since yesterday worries me deeply as a mother. It's as if he's hiding something, but can't talk about it. My concern only deepens seeing my son like this. The change in his condition might be psychological. 1 hour until my afternoon shift at Target. My son's sudden desire to go shopping. His unusual attachment to the new backpack. And his silence since yesterday's visit. Perhaps these were all signs. But at that time, I still didn't understand. As I pulled into the underground parking at Desert Ridge Marketplace, the familiar coolness welcomed us. In Arizona's August, the surface is scorching. The underground parking is like a lifesaver. Michael, are you really okay? Watching my son's back as we walked toward the elevator, I kept checking. Still worried about his morning illness, I was grateful for Target's cool interior. I'm fine. Though his response was bright, I could see the tension in his hands gripping the new backpack. His reflection in the elevator's security mirror showed traces of anxiety. The store is comfortable with air conditioning. It's a relatively quiet weekday afternoon. Taylor Swift's new song plays in the background. Regular customers are eagerly checking the sale corners. Mom, can I push the cart? Michael chooses a red shopping cart. He's enthusiastic, as if his morning illness never happened. First to the grocery section. Carefully selecting items eligible for food stamps. Milk and 2 loaves of bread are on sale. 1 carton of eggs, a bunch of bananas. Found a discount sticker on chicken. Mom, this is on sale too. Michael finds laundry detergent on special. Toilet paper and toothpaste were also items I'd checked in this week's flyer. In the stationery section, we select colored pencils and notebooks for school. My son occasionally seems to check inside his backpack. Is something bothering him? 1:45 p.m., heading to checkout. The self-checkout is crowded, but I spot our regular cashier Sarah. Her lane is relatively empty. Hello, Michael. How was school today? Sarah greets him. Michael stays silent, carefully arranging items on the belt. Usually, he'd chat back cheerfully. I take out my food stamps card from my wallet. The surrounding customers maintain their usual calm atmosphere, not knowing this would be the last peaceful moment. Mrs. Clark, you found today's sale items well. Sarah efficiently scans the items. Milk, bread, chicken. Her thoughtfulness in grouping food stamps eligible items first for payment is much appreciated. Thank you. I checked all of this week's flyers. I answer with a smile while watching Michael. He continues silently arranging items. Usually, he'd exchange jokes with Sarah or look forward to getting stickers. New candy displays line the checkout aisle. Usually, he'd beg, Mom, can I have that? But today he shows no interest. Instead, he clutches his backpack with both hands. There's something desperate in that gesture. Michael, is that new bag a present from Dad? Sarah casually asks. At that moment, my son's body slightly trembles. Yes. A faint reply. Eyes fixed on the floor. The total appears on the display. I check what can be covered by food stamps and what needs cash. While taking bills from my wallet, I sensed something was wrong with my son. Something had been different since yesterday's visit. But I still didn't understand what that something was. Just then, the store's background music cut out, creating a moment of silence. The next instant, a piercing anti-theft gate alarm rang out. As shoppers turned around, my heart jumped. "Don't move." A low, authoritative voice. Turning around, I saw 3 police officers already surrounding us. Phoenix PD's navy blue uniforms. Badges gleaming on their chests, one wearing a body camera. Is something wrong? My voice trembled. While surrounding shoppers watched with bated breath, cashier Sarah covered her mouth with her hand. The daily necessities in our cart stood as witnesses to our normal life until now. "Show us what's in the bag." One officer points to my brown shoulder bag. I could feel Michael trembling behind me. His hands gripped his new backpack even tighter. "Yes, of course." With shaking hands, I open the bag. Wallet, smartphone, lip balm. And the officer's hand quickly pulls something out. A shiny white box. Apple Watch Series 9. Still with product tags and security tag attached. The $499 price tag gleams oddly under the fluorescent lights. My mind goes blank. "Please explain this." What appears to be a senior officer fixes me with a stern gaze. The surrounding air seemed to freeze. This isn't mine." A desperate voice. But the officer's expressions don't change. Sarah watches me with disbelief. "We have you on security cameras." Another officer states coldly. "That's impossible." Words fail me. How could I, who relies on food stamps, afford such an expensive purchase? "You're under arrest." The sound of handcuffs being taken out echoes unusually loud. That's when it happened. "No!" Michael's cry echoes through the silent store. There was a strength in my son's voice I'd never heard before. "Dad said, we'll make Mom look bad so I can get you back." My son's voice trembles. But he continues in a clear tone. "Dad called it Operation Present and put the watch in Mom's bag. He tried to make me help, but Mom doesn't know anything." The police officer's expressions change. The store manager is called, and we're quickly directed to the security room. A small room surrounded by white walls, lined with multiple monitors. "Mrs. Clark, please look at this footage." The security officer operates the keyboard, and footage from 30 minutes ago appears. While I was selecting discounted items in the produce section, Steven's figure appears. Pretending to look at shelf products, he deliberately approaches my bag. Another camera captured his movements in the electronics department. Checking Apple Watch inventory, talking with the cashier. And the moment he hides it in the new backpack. "Michael, can you tell us again in detail what your dad told you?" A female officer gently addresses my son. Holding my hand tightly, Michael begins to tell what happened since yesterday. His voice trembles, but he pronounces each word clearly. "Yesterday, Dad gave me the new backpack, said it was a fun surprise for Mom. Said putting the watch from inside into Mom's bag would be a fun operation." My son takes a deep breath and continues. "But at night, I heard Dad talking on the phone with Rachel, saying, this will definitely get her an arrest record. It'll be advantageous in the custody battle. During Michael's testimony, the monitors continued showing footage from various angles. Stephen waiting for our arrival at the store entrance. Him checking his watch repeatedly. And scenes of him showing the backpack contents to my son while giving instructions. So that's why you weren't feeling well this morning. I held my son's shoulders, finally understanding all the puzzling pieces. Yes. I couldn't tell you about Dad's plan, but I didn't want you to be made into a bad person. The security room clock showed 2:30 p.m. Outside the window, Arizona's strong sunlight beat down. Police officers were on phones with headquarters, ordering Stephen's arrest. I held my trembling son tightly. How much anguish and courage had been packed into this small body. You're such a strong boy. Thank you for telling the truth. Warm tears rolled down my cheeks. Whatever difficulties lay ahead, I knew we could overcome them together. That certainty warmly enveloped my heart. 1 week after the incident, in the Phoenix Police Department interrogation room, all the truth came to light. In the closed space, Stephen's heavy confession echoed. Why did you plan this? To the detective's question, Stephen spoke while looking down. Well, everything was at a dead end. Gambling debts snowballed, collection calls every day. In a trembling voice, he continued. Plus, marriage plans with Caroline, who I met at the casino, were progressing. Investigations revealed that Stephen had started dating Caroline Murphy, who worked at a local casino, 3 months ago. She owned a home and wanted to marry soon. However, Stephen's financial situation was terrible. Caroline says she wants children. But I can't even pay current child support for Michael. At this rate, there's no future with her either. The fluorescent lights illuminated Stephen's tired expression. So you tried to take custody of Michael? Yes. When I consulted a lawyer, they said if there was a criminal record, especially for theft, it would be disadvantageous in custody battles, showing unfitness for child rearing. Stephen began revealing the details of his plan. First, he studied my shopping patterns at Target. During visits with Michael, he also checked the security camera locations. Then he came up with Operation Present, using our son. Why did you try to involve your son in such a scheme? There was anger in the female detective's voice. I thought Michael would believe me. At these words, the air in the interrogation room froze. The investigation revealed other facts too. The phone conversation with Caroline. This will get us custody, we can start a new life. Michael had accidentally overheard this conversation. That's why my son had been feeling sick since morning. 1 month later. Our lives were slowly taking new shape. The court completely suspended Stephen's visitation rights, and a protection order was issued. At the Starbucks in Target, my co-workers showed surprising understanding. They readily accepted shift adjustments, allowing me more time with my son. Jennifer, everyone's moved by the strength of your bond with Michael. Store manager Mary kindly told me. The church community became a great support too. In Sunday school, Michael gradually regained his smile. His voice singing hymns became stronger than before. One Sunday after service, while having a picnic at the nearby park. Mom, I'm glad I told the truth that time. Michael said quietly while munching on his sandwich. You must have been very scared. Yes. But. Michael looked up at the sky and continued. I'm glad I didn't help with Dad's plan. Because I don't want to be separated from you. I hugged my son tightly. Mom is so proud of you too. You've grown into such a brave boy. The sunlight gently embraced us. Nearby, church friends were preparing for a barbecue. Watching this scene, Michael whispered softly. Hey Mom, can you forgive Dad? I searched for words to answer this honest question. It might take time, but someday, surely. Because he's your father. Under Arizona's blue sky, new hope was beginning to sprout. Our story was just beginning its true start. The bond between mother and son would surely grow stronger and deeper from here on.